closely with a company in Dublin, a production company, and they optioned the book. And I think it was the writer Malcolm Campbell who ended up adapting the book that had seen it and brought it to them, and they liked it and they optioned it and they showed it to me. And I was interested in some aspects of the book, particularly the character of Richard. So the book is more of a multi-character story, and it's quite different to the film that we ended up making. But it was a starting point, and I started working with Malcolm, developing the script, bringing it in the direction that we thought was most exciting. Then, about halfway through the process, we thought, well, the only way to move forward is to get cast involved, because there's only a certain amount you can do as an older person in imagining how the sound of those kids and what their lives are like. So we cast quite early in the process, and so then for the next several months we worked, well, I mean 8 months we worked very closely with the cast. And the main cast was casting decision was obviously Jack, and that was a very easy decision because Jack came in and was basically brilliant and has lots of the materials that we needed for the character of Richard. And then thinking about Richard's family, I didn't want to have. I just wanted to make the point that all families are particular. There are no generic families. And I remember growing up, everybody in my school seemed the same to me, but when you went to their houses, you realise they all have their specific differences and interesting nooks and crannies. And so the idea came that we would cast an actor from somewhere else to play Richard's father. And I'm a big fan of Lars's work in The Killing, and we sent him the script, and very happily he agreed to do it.
Yeah, my first meeting was actually, the first meeting was like, I'd done a huge amount of work on the accents, because I was trying to do that. And 10 minutes into the first rehearsal, Lenny said, nah, drop it. It's terrible. So we sort of dropped it and went more along with the idea that he was from Scandinavia, he was from Denmark, and you get that kind of family. It sort of also opens up the film a bit, that it doesn't get too long. So we went with that, put in some lines about him being from Denmark. But in terms of what really turned me on with the script was like two things. That it didn't moralize. The story didn't moralize. And the other thing that I felt a great deal of truth to the relationship between the father and son. And the possibility of describing that kind of friendship that we, at least, as a middle class in Denmark, have towards our children. We want to be friends more than really parent. And all that is deep friendship and filled with hope can, in a fleeting moment, go from joy to disgust, to hate, to never returning. So that was very true and appealed to me. And then, having seen Lenny's two other movies, I knew he would be the guy to do that truth.
About the character, I like the idea that he was somebody who was kind of full of his own bravado in a way, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but he's very much driven by his morality and what he feels about himself and about the people around him, and his ideas for the world and how his world should be, and how the world itself should interact with him. And that, in a way, is what makes him kind of naturally quite popular, and he seems kind of effortlessly like the guy that everybody wants to be around and spend time with. But there's also something actually very sad about Richard, and quite solemn. And you see that in moments where he's on his own in the first half of the film, where it's not like, he's upset with anything really necessarily. It's just that he's kind of a little bit of a loner as well in a way. And I thought that was an interesting thing to play, and that'd be, a bit of a challenge for me to do, but it'd be, really good, really interesting. So yeah, we also developed for a long time before we went in to do principal photography. We spent 8 months working on the film before we actually shot it. And during that time, the cast as an ensemble with Lenny and with Malcolm, and at times with Lars as well, sat down and we just talked about our experiences of growing up where we did and the societies that we lived in and the schools we'd gone to and the things we did, and we kind of developed the truth in the script through that process. Everybody has a different opinion on what, and that's funny actually, because I never thought about it in these terms before, but it's like the title actually, it's almost as though the title is like the epilogue of
the title is both, what does he do in the film and
what does he do
next?
after? Yeah. And that's a question that everybody should ask themselves when they walk out, I think. That should be the thing that you are left with. For me, I think there's, I think that he feels it. I think that it's going to be something that he carries around for the rest of his life. I don't think that he's necessarily going to face those consequences, but it is something that will eat away at him and destroy him for the rest of his life.
I think the thing that eats away at him is the fact that he can't face the consequences.
Yeah.
As much as what he did, it's the recognition that he's a coward, that he's not able to deal with it. And the other thing I think is really important is there was an aspect of, in the script, we had written in this idea that Richard's father had suffered from depression. It's very subtly there in a couple of scenes you recognise it, and Lars plays it so well. You see that he's been through something in his own life, and it's somehow come out the other side. That's also part of the tragedy, that this is going to push him back. But I think what I find really sort of moving about it is when you think about Richard as this kind of jock kid, this kind of cool, very successful kid, you also recognise that he was a boy who had to fight really hard somehow to survive his childhood, to be positive, and so when that's taken away, you see that boy again, and you see a boy without the resources to deal with this. I mean, it's a testament to Jack, his capacity to find those moments where he falls away and he reveals something else, and also to Lars, because the idea of a father saying goodbye to his son, which is what he's doing in that scene on the bench. That really, I didn't direct Lars to hold Jack's face. I didn't, what I did was give him, I think, a space and a truthful sort of scene and a set of kind of discussions and ways of approaching it. But that really came out very much in.
I think it's what I find when I see the movie is extraordinary, the level of acting in terms of truth that you bring forth in all these young people, and it's sort of held documentarily with the camera, like you say.
You feel you're looking in at it, and it's really happening. I mean, and then it's at the level of sort of shifts in sequence and in focus that you start to create the poetry. So I try not to make scenes dramatic in the conventional way, except when they really have to be, which is that scene between Father and son.
We wanted to do it in such a way that even though there's kind of comedic parts of the film, parts that are funny, that you would always be observing this ensemble of kids doing what they're doing, but you'd never actually feel part of it.
Yeah.
It'd be like you're viewing it from the outside, but you're never actually involved.
I always said that, if you watch a bunch of teenagers behaving over there, you won't listen to the specific things they're saying because it's just not interesting. But you watch them like a wildlife documentary. So I always imagine that opening phase of the film will be like we're looking at a family of lions in the savannah. Look how the alpha male lion dominates the young. You don't have to understand what they're roaring about to understand their behavior. The way we did it was, Lenny and I had a good chat about it before we did it. And we decided not to actually rehearse it to that sort of intensity or anything like that. We tried to find these kind of physical shapes where we could let it naturally grow from itself. And the one that we went with in the end was where Richard would be asleep. And it's that thing of waking up out of a dream into a nightmare where just it rushes over you, you know what I mean? And it's just too much for him to handle. And he's on his own and he panics.
and that's where it came from. But in order to get to the intensity, that just came from the trust that I had for Lenny, 100%. Just that I knew no matter what happened, it'd be the right thing, he'd find it the right way in the edit, and that I could just really go for it and trust him.
I mean, the thing about that scene as well, that's what's important is, or how you approach a scene like that. I think you've got to marry the physical and the psychological. So although we talked a lot about how Richard felt, and we really talked mostly about physical sort of memories of things like, waking up feeling very uneasy in the nighttime, the way in which before you put your armor on, those thoughts are very immediate and raw. And then there is, it sounds really kind of bizarre, but it's, the thing, if you force yourself to laugh, you can actually start really laughing.
Yeah.
So the initial part feels awful because you've got to just go, but if you really force it, you can kind of get over that and actually find the feeling behind it.
Yeah.
And so in a way there was a sort of physical tension that we talked about that you just can't bear. You get up and you start shaking it out of yourself. And if you just Jack trusted that if you just started doing that, and he didn't hold it back, it would just turn into something unbelievably sort of visceral.
Yeah.
And it did, And if
In fact,
you don't,
we had no music as well at all. There was no soundtrack outside. It was just silence outside of screaming. That was just really disturbing, that, isn't it?
It was hard to do, and it's also shot in a particular way where the frame can't contain the action, so the lens is a bit tighter than you would, because he's going, you can't hold him, and so you feel the force of it. I think it's an amazing, from everybody's point of view, a really great sequence. I'm very pleased with it. The tension of the day builds to that very successfully.
And it was a necessary scene for the film as well. We needed to have that moment where it really all just fell apart. I don't think it would have been. It would have been a different film.
It would have, yeah.